September 25, 1978. A clear, calm Monday morning over Southern California. The kind of day where nothing feels out of the ordinary. In the air, a Boeing 727 operated by Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182 was descending into San Diego after a short layover in Los Angeles. It had started its journey in Sacramento with 135 people on board. A full cabin of business travelers, families returning home, and crew members on what should have been a routine route. PSA Flight 182 was just minutes from landing, preparing for final approach into San Diego International Airport, also known as Lindbergh Field, one of the most notoriously difficult airports in the US to land at. It's located smack in the middle of a dense city. Pilots flying into San Diego have to descend low over houses and businesses, threading the needle between air traffic and urban infrastructure. It's an environment where absolute precision matters, and where the margin for error is razor thin. But PSA 182 wasn't alone in the sky. At the same time, a Cessna 172, a small privately operated single-engine aircraft, was flying in the same airspace. On board were a student pilot and his flight instructor, completing a training flight under what's called Visual Flight Rules, or VFR. That means they were responsible for spotting other aircraft and maintaining separation by eye, not by instruments or radar. This is where the system began to break down. According to air traffic control protocols at the time, the responsibility for separation between aircraft was often shared between the controller and the pilots, especially when one of the aircraft was flying visually. At 9:01 a.m., PSA 182's crew radioed to the tower that they had the Cessna in sight. That single transmission would prove devastating. What the PSA pilots didn't realize was that they had briefly spotted the Cessna, but then lost it. It had dropped out of view, likely hidden beneath the nose of the 727, invisible from the cockpit. Yet they continued descending, unaware that the small plane was directly beneath them, flying into their path. Less than a minute later, the unimaginable happened. At approximately 2,600 feet above San Diego's North Park neighborhood, the Boeing 727 collided mid-air with the Cessna. The impact tore through the smaller aircraft instantly, destroying it in the blink of an eye. But the damage to the 727 was equally catastrophic. The right wing was sheared open, fuel spilled into the sky, and the plane became uncontrollable. Witnesses on the ground reported seeing the jet suddenly roll, trailing smoke and fire, spinning downward in a wide arc. Seconds later, it slammed into a densely populated residential neighborhood, leveling 22 homes in an instant and setting blocks of the city on fire. The impact created a crater, ignited secondary explosions, and left a scene so horrific that first responders described it as something from a war zone. All 144 people aboard both aircraft died, along with 7 people on the ground. It remains the deadliest aviation accident in California history, and one of the most tragic mid-air collisions ever recorded in the United States. But what happened next was even more disturbing. The cockpit voice recorder, later recovered from the wreckage, captured the final haunting moments inside PSA 182. At first, the pilots believed they had passed the Cessna. Their tone was calm. But then, a moment of confusion. "Where is he? Do you see him?" one of the crew asked. "No," came the reply. Then a flash of realization. "Whoa, that was close." And then, "Tower, we're going down. This is PSA." Those were the final words ever spoken from Flight 182. The investigation that followed was one of the most detailed in the history of American aviation. The National Transportation Safety Board concluded that multiple failures had occurred by the PSA flight crew, by the Cessna pilots, and by air traffic control. But the larger issue was systemic. There were no adequate tools in the cockpit to help large commercial planes identify and avoid small aircraft. The reliance on visual separation in crowded airspace had become an outdated, dangerous flaw in the system. And perhaps even worse, nothing changed immediately. The aviation industry was slow to respond. It wasn't until 8 years later, after another devastating mid-air collision over Cerritos, California, that the FAA finally made sweeping reforms. That 1986 crash involving an Aeromexico DC-9 and a Piper Archer claimed 82 more lives and reignited public outrage. Only then did Congress pass legislation mandating traffic collision avoidance systems, or TCAS, on all commercial aircraft. This technology now tracks surrounding aircraft and issues automatic warnings: climb, descend, or adjust heading, giving pilots clear instructions to avoid collisions before they happen. It's a system that has since saved countless lives, but it came too late for the people aboard PSA Flight 182. The human toll was staggering. In the aftermath of the San Diego crash, 22 families lost their homes, and dozens of people were physically and emotionally scarred. One survivor, a young man who had just left his house moments before it was obliterated, later described the sound as a freight train coming from the sky. Firefighters worked for days to extinguish the blaze and recover remains from the wreckage. Today, there is a memorial park in San Diego's North Park neighborhood, where trees have been planted in memory of each person who died. There's a plaque, a sculpture, and annual remembrance services. But for many residents, the trauma is still raw. Some still remember where they were standing, what they saw, and how the sky turned black with smoke. And yet, outside of San Diego and aviation circles, most people have never heard of PSA Flight 182. The airline itself no longer exists. It was absorbed by US Airways, which later merged with American Airlines. But the lessons it taught continue to shape how we fly today. So the next time you look out your airplane window and see another aircraft nearby, or wonder how it is that thousands of flights operate safely every single day, remember that the systems keeping you safe were born from tragedies like this. The procedures, the alerts, the invisible digital safeguards all came from disasters we were too late to prevent. PSA Flight 182 was a wake-up call. A moment when the sky opened up and swallowed 144 lives in seconds. It didn't have to happen, but it did. And remembering it is how we make sure it never happens again. If you want to hear more untold stories that history tried to forget, subscribe. Because sometimes the most important lessons aren't written in books, they're carved into the sky.